Hello and good afternoon, Miles here. Today's topic is the ubiquitous Land Rover. I've owned various Land Rovers over the years. This particular one is called Dolly, and I've owned her for about 15 years. She's definitely my favourite. And today's a very special day because she's just turned 60 years old. But before I show you this particular vehicle, let's talk a little bit about where these vehicles came from. If we rewind all the way back to D-Day during the Second World War, when American, Canadian and British forces invaded the North French coast. The Americans brought with them lots of vehicles, from Sherman tanks to the Willys Jeep. Now, the Willys Jeep, that was strictly a military vehicle, proved to be extremely useful in the invasion and the subsequent driving back of the German forces. What made the Willys Jeep so particularly amazing was not what it was, but more about what it wasn't. You see, it was a very, very simple vehicle. It even came in a crate that you used to have to assemble yourself. It had a small engine, 3 forward gears, simple axles, simple transmission, so it was easy to fix in the field when things went wrong. It had no complicated hydraulics, it had no complicated transmission, it had no complicated electrics. The Willys Jeep served the US Army really well during the Second World War, and after VE Day, when the Americans pulled out of Europe, they left a lot of their old Willys Jeeps behind. One of these Willys Jeeps ended up on a farm only about an hour from where I am here on Anglesey. This farm was owned by a man called Maurice Wilks. Maurice Wilks was one of the head honchos of the Rover car company. Now, Rover had been very busy during the war making aircraft parts for Hurricanes, Spitfires and Lancaster bombers. But with the end of the war, all of a sudden they found themselves needing to go back into the civilian car market again. Maurice Wilks looked at his old Jeep they'd been using around the farm, and he came up with an idea for a similar product for the Rover car company. But Maurice's idea for a vehicle was not going to be exactly the same as the Jeep. There'd have to be quite a few differences. First of all, the Jeep was an all-steel vehicle, but steel in the United Kingdom was still very much a ration commodity. What Rover did have access to was lots and lots of sheets of aircraft aluminium and aircraft green paint. The vehicle Rover ended up with actually ended up being quite different to the Jeep, even though it was certainly inspired by it. They went for a vehicle that was very multi-purpose. It was intended for utility companies, for farmers, the gentry, anyone who wanted some kind of simple four-wheel drive vehicle that was easy to maintain. Unsurprisingly, the entire body was made out of aircraft aluminium and the whole thing was painted in RAF green. They called it the Land Rover and they unveiled it to the automotive press in 1947. It was only supposed to be a stopgap vehicle for them before they could get back into proper car production using all steel bodies. But actually it ended up being extremely popular and it sold very well. With the exception of the steel chassis, which is a replaceable part of one of these cars anyway, most of the rest of it's made out of aluminium, and aluminium doesn't rot in the same way steel does. So Rover accidentally ended up producing a vehicle that can last forever. And that's a bit of an own goal if you're a car company. But it does go to explain why 70% of these vehicles are still on the road today. You'll notice the lights are central and tucked out the way. In fact, everything important that this vehicle needs to operate is in the centre, not in these wings. These wings are completely empty for the reason that if you crash into a rock or a tree and you end up having the wing ripped off, you can still get home. You've not lost anything important. The lights are 7-inch steel beam units. They're completely submersible, so if you end up driving through a river that's deeper than the headlights, which I have done in this very vehicle, you don't end up blowing the lights out with water on the bulbs. In terms of the transmission, they're really simple. You've got the engine at the front in line, goes to a 4-speed gearbox, which then goes to a 2-speed transfer box, prop shafts to beam axles at the front and rear. The suspension is provided by 4 very basic medieval era cart springs that provide excellent articulation and an extremely rough ride. In fact, it was done that way on purpose to stop people driving too fast off-road. Under the bonnet is a really simple carburettor fed 4-cylinder inline petrol engine of 2.25 litre displacement. I do have a Bluetooth sound system on the car, but unfortunately it's broken. Last time it went underwater it didn't survive. You'll see this particular vehicle has no windscreen, it's got no doors and it's got no roof, and that's not because I don't have these things. I do, they're all stored in a shed at home. It's because I really like that open top driving experience that you just don't get with any other car. You can actually see all the way around you, you can hear everything all the way around you, and you can even smell the woods as you're driving through them, or the crops. A bit like driving a motorbike but without having to wear a helmet. You might not think it'd be legal not having all these things, but it actually is. You don't need these things if you don't want them. If they unbolt, then you don't need to have them attached. In fact, this vehicle doesn't even need seat belts legally, although I've put some in for my own safety. Lots of people have different ideas on how a vehicle like this should be kept. There are those who think a vehicle like this should be restored to absolute factory standard and put in a museum somewhere for people to admire. There are other people who take old vehicles like this and chop them up and turn them into mud pluggers and boingies. The long and the short of it is, a Land Rover is whatever you want it to be. I like Dolly just the way she is. She's rugged, fun, practical, and helps me out all the time with my daily jobs. I suppose it's time to go for a bit of a drive. She wasn't in brilliant condition when we bought her. One of those purchases that was a little bit more heart than head maybe. Mostly because the chassis, which was the original steel, it's 46-year-old steel at that point. It was pretty rotten. It wasn't even casting a shadow really. So I had to buy a new chassis. They're available. You can buy them ready-made, you can buy them galvanised even, and I did. This one is a galvanised chassis. So to be honest, it'll last longer than I will. So I think you never really own one of these vehicles. You're more of a custodian at best really. Someone else will have this after me. In fact, I'm owner number 10. So she changes hands every 6 years on average. But I've had a 15, so it's a good record. And I've no intention of selling her anytime soon either. Been all over the UK in Dolly. I live in North Wales. I've been down to London several times. I've been to Oxford. I've been to the Peak District, Derbyshire. And I've been to the Lake District. And I'm pretty sure I've been to up to the northeast as well. I might have been in a different Land Rover actually, I can't quite remember. She's a lovely old girl really. I quite enjoy bringing her out as long as the weather's not too bad. Once you get above about 30 miles an hour, you really need some kind of goggles or sunglasses. You can't really do without it because of the wind in your eyes. Once you get up to about 75 miles an hour, it gets quite terrifying actually. You know, it's You know, you feel quite vulnerable actually. It doesn't go much faster than that. I think I've had her up to about 80, maybe a little bit faster. Believe me, in this car that's enough. Feels more like 300 miles an hour in another car. Well, I hope you've enjoyed this video that I've put together in celebration of my Series 2 Land Rover's 60th birthday yesterday. Don't forget to like and subscribe, leave any comments you like in the lower section. And to answer the old question as to which vehicle's best between the Willys Jeep or the Land Rover series, well, depends on the driver. Goodbye.